Good morning. Today's session is your safety briefing and health survival tips session, which is compulsory for all inmates entering Junee Correctional Centre. Regardless of whether you have been an inmate here previously, this is a compulsory session for you all. We will run for approximately 15 minutes through this presentation, and then we will sit through and go through the assessment together. Our allotted time complete for this session is an hour and a half. There will be a break. There will be a multiple choice test at the beginning of the first session covering your understanding of the health and survival component. There will then be a group training where your testing will be your observation, my observation of your practical demonstrations, and finally an assessment to test your problem solving skills once you have completed the training. So why are you here and what will we cover? As you should be aware, Junee is a working prison, and whether you are sentenced or on remand, but depending on your classification, you will be required to work within the prison during your time here. This may be on your pod, in the kitchen or bakery, in industries, or out on the farm. Therefore, it is imperative you learn the basic work safety requirements and how to identify and manage risk and safe practices. In this session, you will understand what it means to work safely, implement work safety requirements in areas within JCC, contribute to workplace hazard identification, understand manual handling and safe practices when lifting, and follow specific workplace practices when working at JCC. Okay, so we're going to talk about work safety requirements. We first of all need to identify the designated persons for reporting queries and concerns about safety in the workplace and PCBU. So depending on your time outside and the jobs that you've had, I'm sure some of you would know exactly what PCBU stands for. So we're talking about a person or persons conducting business or an undertaking. We need to look at what a hazard is and what a risk is, and we need to identify existing and potential hazards in the workplace, report them to designated persons, and record them according to our workplace procedures. So what is a hazard? A hazard is anything with the potential to cause injury or property damage. A risk is the likelihood that such injury or damage would occur. So we've got our hazard and then we've got the risk. The risk is how likely the hazard is to occur. Employers or businesses, or anyone who falls under the definition of a person conducting a business or undertaking, a PCBU, has legal obligations under work health and safety laws. We need to identify hazards in the workplace, assess the risks those hazards create, then eliminate or minimise them as much as possible. An employer and or PCBU has a legal duty to eliminate or minimise risks to health and safety of workers at their workplace or their business or undertaking. The person with management or control of a workplace also has a legal duty to make sure, so far as is reasonably practical, that there are no health and safety risks to anyone working in or visiting the workplace. This includes when people are entering or exiting the workplace. It generally does not include residences unless the residence is occupied for the purpose of conducting business. When we're talking about your time here and your work while at JCCC, the PCBU would be GEO. Most of you will have worked under a PCBU on the outside or even been the PCBU yourselves. Let's go around the room, and if you're comfortable in contributing, please do so. Okay, so we've looked at the PCBU. Now we'll look in depth at yourselves as workers and your obligations. We need to also look at who exactly is classed as a worker in these circumstances, and how do you think this applies to you as inmates? Do you still have the same rights and responsibilities as workers inside prison as you did on the outside? Absolutely you do. As does the jail have the responsibility as a PCBU to keep you safe. Part of that obligation is ensuring you all complete this safety briefing within your first 2 weeks here, which is why you're here with me today. So, your work obligations. This will be your obligations while you're working within the centre. A worker is a person who carried out work in any capacity for a business or employer or other PCBU. They can be an employee, a trainee, apprentice, or work experience student, a volunteer, which is often overlooked in the workplace, so volunteers are workers, an outworker, a contractor or subcontractor, an employee of a subcontractor or contractor, and an employee of a labour hire company. Pre-starts. So when we're talking about safety and protecting yourselves and others around you, a major part of this is to do a pre-start checklist. How many of us here in the room do a walk around your own vehicle before you jump in and drive off? No one? Exactly. Neither do I. Pretty normal behaviour, right? But on the work site, your obligations are very different. I'll give you an example. Young apprentice working on a mine site. Boss arrives at the mess hall in the site vehicle and asks the apprentice to go across to the other side of the mine to collect a piece of equipment. The apprentice does as the boss requests, as you do, but doesn't do a pre-start. Unbeknownst to the apprentice, the boss has previously reversed into a machine and damaged the tailgate. Upon arrival back at the mess hall, the boss accuses the apprentice of damaging the vehicle, and the apprentice has no leg to stand on because he had not done the pre-start checklist. If he had done, he would not be in this situation. So while it might seem mundane, and while in our everyday being we don't do it, when you're on the work site, it's imperative, especially if you're working on things like forklifts. Duty of care. Often when I run these sessions, inmates say to me that there is no duty of care. That's a misconception. You guys are under exactly the same obligations to yourselves and each other, and the jail has the same obligations to you guys as they would on the outside. So further to the apprentice mine example, the same applies when talking about your duty of care to yourself and others in the workplace. For example, should you be working in industries, you should always check the machinery before using it and report any damage or maintenance required to your supervisor immediately. Same applies if you're a cleaner on the pod. Sounds like an easy job without too many areas that could cause harm, but think about the chemicals you're using, think about the disposal of rubbish, think about the safe storage of chemicals, in particular at the end of the shift when you're in a hurry to return to the pod or head for a meal break. Think about the things that can go wrong in those circumstances. So, any of you that worked in construction or similar areas on the outside would have seen these guys. Anyone want to tell me what they're called? It's a risk matrix. So we're talking about the likelihood that the circumstance will occur and the impact that it will have if it does occur. How serious is the risk and how serious is the damage or potential damage to person or equipment? Let's talk about risk assessments in detail. I know that most of you would have seen them. So anybody seen them and worked in them on the outside? Okay, so John's been happy enough to volunteer himself in this situation. John was an electrician on the outside and he's worked with these on sites that he's worked on. So let's look at how we move up and down the matrix. The example John has given sounded simple, just a damaged electrical cord. On its own, it is relatively simple. If we are to add in water, the risk increases, as does the impact. Where if we were to use a universal remote circuit breaker, we reduce the risk and the impact. So when we're assessing risk, we have this lovely little triangle here. Obviously, the elimination at the top is the most effective because we've completely eliminated the risk. The least effective down the bottom is PPE. So using John's example again and assessing risk, can we discuss some examples of each risk reduction process here in relation to John's specific example? PPE, while it will assist in identifying the worker clearly on the site, it will not offer any assistance in this case. Policies and procedures will assist in identifying the damaged power cord, but like this training is only effective if you guys put it into action when you leave. Engineering controls. We can eliminate the damaged cable or implement the remote circuit breaker. Isolation. We isolate the damaged cord to prevent anyone else using it. Substitution. Again, we swap out the damaged cable, but the most effective measure would be to eliminate the hazard and risk altogether. This can be done simply by eliminating the corded power tool altogether and replacing with corded power tools. So, 6 categories of workplace hazards. For those of you that worked on sites, you would have seen some or all of these sites. So let's go through them together. Looking at these examples of hazards, can we discuss what they are and what falls into each category? How do they relate to you and your time in here? Biological. Feces, urine, blood, all examples that you are likely to come across while in DCC. Chemical, your cleaning products on the pod. Unfortunately, drugs. Physical hazards, heat, violence, assault. Safety hazards, damaged equipment, slip and trip hazards. Your ergonomic hazards, not using proper manual handling and lifting techniques. Psychosocial, a big one inside prison. Bullying, harassment, isolation, and confined spaces. Some of you will come into JCC perfectly healthy mentally, but this environment can damage your psychosocial status and your mental health. So it's really important to be aware of those hazards and identify them and speak to your clinic if needed. So let's look at this lovely workplace. Pretty stock standard and something that we would see in any workplace. And again, a lot of people working in the same workplace every day. We talk about becoming, I guess, lackluster and a little bit lackadaisy when we're doing the same thing over and over again. So while this is a classic workplace identified here, as you can see, there's multiple hazards that occur throughout the day and can be overlooked if not looking at the site from a safety perspective and the what ifs. We could go weeks, for example, with the fire exit blocks because we haven't had time to deal with the pallets in the delivery. But what happens if there's a fire and we need to exit to evacuate safely? Exactly, we're all in a world of trouble. So old mate driving the forklift, he can't see because he's got his forks up too high with the pallet on deck. He can't see the guy walking in front of him. We've got unsecured chemicals. We've got rubbish on the ground. We've got water on the floor. We've got other individuals, employees carrying boxes, blocking their eyesight while we're walking through. We've got a machine guard lifted. That may have been to action some maintenance, but nobody's closed it. So we've opened up another opportunity for injury. Okay, so now we're looking at jail specific items. These are your health survival tips. We're talking about FinCol. We've looked in depth at your safety while working in the prison. As we're in the unique situation where your workplace is, it's also your place of residence. We need to look in depth at your health and safety while in prison. Does everyone know what FinCol is and where to access it? Yes? Excellent. Now, how do we activate it? Cold or hot water? Great. Cold. Correct. How long is it effective after activation? 8 hours. Great work, guys. Now, while the obvious best practice is to abstain from drug use, but I'm not here to lecture you. If you are using and sharing fits, please use the protocols addressed in these tips. Effective hand washing. This should be second nature to us all on the other side of COVID, but we all got a little bit caught up in hand sanitizing and forgot our basic hand washing and cold and flu protocols. So, effective hand washing. We're washing for 20 seconds, we're coughing into our elbow, and we're putting our tissues in the bin immediately after use. Now, the nasties. Every time we go through this part of the training, there are snickers and under the breath comments, but more scary for me as an educator in here is seeing young inmates come in with no understanding of hepatitis, how it is caught, or the treatments available. Yes, you can get Hep A from a toilet door if an infected person hasn't washed their hands. Yes, you can catch Hep B from unsafe sex or sharing needles. And yes, there is a treatment available for Hep C that is 95% effective rate. HIV. While it is very rare to contract HIV inside New South Wales prisons, you still need to be aware of the risks and how to protect yourselves. Always use a condom or dental dam, and these are available from the clinic. Get tested if you think you may have been infected, and don't share needles or get jail tats. They look terrible anyway, so just don't risk it, guys. So, we're going to break now. Thank you for taking part in the safety briefing. We will complete your multiple choice exam as part of your testing for your understanding of this component, and then we'll move on to the other sessions. Thanks, guys.